Susie Steger-Peters is Manager, Strategic Initiatives at Center for Learning Innovation at the Department of Education and Training. Susie has worked in education as a teacher K-12 and also worked at the Board of Studies. Susie's son has completed his HSC in 2006. Hilary Hughes, Chief Learning Design Officer also at CLI, has taught K-12 in comprehensive, selective and private schools. Hilary also taught at TAFE and university. Her two children have both completed the HSC. Ruth Mason is project officer at CLI. Ruth worked in 7 to 12 in both boys and girls high schools. Both her children have completed the HSC. Dr. Ravi Seethamraju, currently working in University of Sydney in School of Business. He researches and publishes widely on business education, business information systems and process management, and his PhD was on management of professional engineers and their occupational psychology. I welcome the panel to Telugu Vani Radio on 2000 FM. The primary objective of every family in our community is to provide a better education for their children. It is not an easy task to achieve. It is a constant struggle. On top of it, there is immense of social pressure, emotional involvement, financial burden, heavy competition, and a lot more. But at the end of the day, there will be great credibility and satisfaction for the parents. This is the topic discussed in many occasions at almost every social gathering. Various thoughts are floating around. Therefore, I would like to present a thorough insight about the education and its objectives, and how best parents can achieve their dreams come true, and how the students can appreciate the education for their life building. Education is a very common and important topic largely discussed in every now and then. Actually, what is education and what are the objectives of education? To start with, a quote from a great thinker, spiritual leader, Swami Vivekananda: "Education is the manifestation of the perfection already in man. Education by which character is formed, strength of mind is increased, intellect is expanded, and by which one can stand on one's own feet." This was stated more than 130 years ago. In this modern world, what would be aims and objectives of the education? Do we still consider and agree with Vivekananda definition for the education, or what else we think about education? The very foundation is laid in primary and high school education. That is the base for all the future developments. Therefore, let us start with the opinions from Susie Steger-Peters. Susie, what would you think the aims and objectives of education?
Good morning, and thank you, Raghu, for having me on the program this morning. In terms of the aims and objectives for education, I'd like to draw on the Australian national goals for schooling and make some comparisons with those goals and the beliefs and understandings of the great Swami Vivekananda. You talked about, or Swami talked about, character being formed and intellect being expanded through education, and the end product, if you like, being an individual who can stand on his or her own 2 feet. And I believe that's what we all want at the end of the day, whether we're teachers or parents or both. If we link back to Australia's goals for schooling, we can see quite clearly that a number of those goals talk about the same sorts of beliefs. The goals talk about things like developing self-confidence, optimism and high self-esteem, which is important for all of us. They also talk about developing capacities to judge and to judge effectively and be responsible citizens in our global community. The goals also talk about developing skills in analysis and problem solving, so broad, general skills, but not at the exclusion of understanding content closely as well. Now, the goals also talk about developing a range of career options, and I know that that's a topic we're going to go into a little bit deeper further on in the discussion here. And that's these are the goals for schooling and how they link with what Swami's teachings have to offer us. And I'd like also to add that as a parent, it's fundamental, well, for me personally, but I probably share this with many millions of others, that my children are happy in education, whether they're little kids or teenagers or whether they're adults, because learning is lifelong. So they need to be happy. They need to believe that education prepares them well for life and continues to prepare them for challenges as they emerge.
Dr. Ravi Garu, what would you expect from education from your experiences?
Thank you, Raghuveer. Namaskaram andarki. In a higher education context, what we expect from the delivery perspective is that we would like to impart some values. If you look at some of the basic logos of most of the universities, you will notice that they would put terms like courage, intellectual rigor, inquiry, and those kind of questions. So increasingly now universities are actually focusing on these kind of transferable generic skills and some values. Values such as ethics and skills such as learning to learn on a continuous basis, communication skills. And most importantly, we would like our students to be able to challenge the status quo and ask questions. Ask questions, ask questions. That is why sometimes I feel very sad when after my lecture, when I ask students any questions, there is a dead silence sometimes. And you feel sad that students are not really trying to ask more questions. That is the unfortunate part, but that is the primary goal of higher education.
By and large, every parent in the community is aspiring for better education, which of course should lead to a desired career in future. It may vary from community to community based on their cultural background in this multicultural society. Even then, we observe a common phenomena in this present society. There is a large generation gap between parents and children. The parents' background is quite different from the present society. The circumstances in which they were brought up, the situations they faced, etc. were very much demanded by the local needs. Today, everything is global. The human skills are traded in the global market. Even in this global village, some of the courses such as medicine, engineering, law, etc. are well regarded as professional courses, and hence children are advised to get into those courses. Hilary, what are your thoughts in this regard?
I have an opinion as both a parent and as a teacher. I think we're really conscious that every culture places very different value on each career and each profession, and some cultures are more concerned with caring, some with more financial matters, and I think everybody wants their children to be a success in their culture, but everybody has a different idea of what that success is. And I'm asking, is it social status? Is it financial security? A happy family life? Or job satisfaction that's the most important? We often hear stories of young people who've ended up in a career that they have no interest in purely because it was their parents' choice and they've been good children, in inverted commas, and done what their parents asked, but they're not really happy with their career. And I guess there's a fine line for parents between guiding their children and railroading their children into what they end up doing. I think that a student's natural talents and interests have to be weighed up with the parents' aspirations, and whether or not the children are going to be happy as well as the parents are going to be happy. I think there's this fine line, and That's one of the, I know a doctor who's also a wonderful concert pianist, and probably he would really rather have done that. And I know a lot of people who've changed career. I think the world is changing so rapidly. I think the latest research shows that children today may have as many as 7 different jobs and careers in their lifetime, and we've got to make sure that our students have a really global and transferable employment opportunities. That might mean communication skills, actually being good with to speak to other people, and really up-to-date IT skills might be the most transferable thing at the moment. But who knows, I think half the jobs that they may end up with haven't even been invented yet. And we've got to make sure that our students have the skills to cope with that and aren't just focused into a very narrow professional career. I know that students are maturing much later, and they're saying that the kids in their 20s are really not mature, and it's much more their 30s they're even making decisions about what they really want to do with their life. So, having the broadest number of skills, I think, is going to be the most important thing. I think even in the United States, students do a whole degree before then they specialise in law or medicine and keep those broad skills.
Yeah, that's fantastic, actually. In our culture also there is, which we call slokam. It says about education should aim at giving happiness at the end. That is the main motto. In our language it says, Vidya dadati vinayam vinayadyati patratvam patratva dhanamapnoti dhana dharmam tata sukam. So education should end up giving happiness to the person. So you are right, absolutely that's the right point. Now, whatever the career we choose, it should be interesting for the student.
I think so.
So, yeah, there is a talk about over a period by continuous practice or doing things repeatedly, you may develop interest. What do you say about that thing? I don't know.
I don't know. I know a lot of children who were forced to go to piano lessons and never really enjoyed it. Yes. So I'm not entirely sure that's true. So I'm a little bit cynical about that one. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think if students are really enjoying it, we all know that teachers who have classes that go really well because the students really enjoy the subject, or students do very well in a subject because they really enjoy the teacher. It can be anything that they might be very artistic and they like having the chance to be artistic in their art class. It may not be a profession as such, but it doesn't mean that a student who's brilliant couldn't be a graphic artist or the most intelligent and fabulous teacher that a whole generation of students ever meet. They might be a wonderful musician or a writer or an IT architect. They might be a specialist nurse who helps save hundreds of lives. I don't think that just narrowing down to a couple of professions is maybe the best use of all that talent.
Ravi Garu, what do you say about this same topic, about the profession and education?
In my opinion, there is no such thing as best profession or best course. There is no guarantee for success to a particular profession. I believe every profession has a place in the society and it got its own usefulness. However, its importance, demand and earning power varies from time to time for every profession, as we can see in our lifetime. But what is important is that today there are very many opportunities for our children, much more than what we had when we were kids. So therefore, as a parent, I think we should expose them and give them opportunities. What is important is that a child should excel in whatever profession or course he or she chooses to do. Because every child has got massive potential to achieve success. So therefore, as parents, I think we should actually nurture those qualities and expose them to as many areas as possible when they are very young, so that they could actually explore and find out what they are good at and then decide, rather than we deciding for them as a parent and then pushing them into that particular line of course, etc. Because a study by 3 universities in Australia have actually found recently that about 42% of the Asian students, unfortunately, have no interest in the course that they are studying. And the reason they cite it is because their parents wanted them to study. That is the most unfortunate state of affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi. Hillary, I would like to have another question with you. So, by choosing for example, a student gets very high rank in UAI, who can get easily into medicine, definitely, but chooses, he is not interested, he or she. Then do you think the capabilities of the student is wasted by going into different field?
Well, certainly not. I've taught some fabulous students who are terribly clever and they don't want to do medicine. Some of them don't even have the personal skills to be a doctor and actually work with people nicely. So I think their skills can be used, and if they are so clever, why wouldn't they be a very clever writer or a very fabulous graphic artist, or they might write the best advertising jingles of anybody that anybody ever heard. I think they can use their intellect in a lot of other things. And if it's something that they enjoy better than medicine, then that's better for patients. If they've got a doctor that doesn't really want to be a doctor, I'm thinking, wouldn't they be better as some other sort of job that they really do enjoy? So I don't think it's wasted intellect. I think we have room in our society for some very clever people to do anything that they like, and they may become radio stars, or they may television stars. You just don't know where they might end up.
This is Teluguvani on Radio 2000 FM. In the ideal world, every step in the education is aimed at achieving a suitable career path. I think so. At the end of the day, some may achieve and some may not. But some end up with changing careers. Therefore, how far we can go in the direction of career path, when would be an ideal time to start thinking about career? Is it from the school certificate or HSC or at the university? Susie, could you please share your thoughts in this line?
Thank you. Yeah. Career paths. It really is a quite vexed question, and perhaps the answer is that there is no ideal time to start thinking about career paths. On the other hand, maybe it's something that should be considered and discussed at home, at school, among friends quite frequently. Because going back to what Hillary said, we're living in times of change. The jobs that are going to be confronting our children in a couple of years, in 5 years, in 10 years' time, haven't even been thought of yet. So I think we need to be at the ready, and we need to be considering what the skill set might be for development for students to embrace whatever opportunities are delivered to them or made available to them in future. Perhaps, though, in terms of this question or this whole topic, what if we redirected our attention on not so much when do we start thinking about a career path, but we focus on how do we develop in all of our students a real, genuine, authentic love for learning that goes on lifelong, rather than focusing on, well, I need to please somebody else in order to win, admiration and a place, appreciation and status within this community or this family. And I think, too, when we focus more on a love for learning and look at our students as individuals and begin to nurture a genuine interest in learning and in learning new things and in opening up discovering the wonders of the world, then maybe we are better placed to even lead to an increased engagement with learning. And that follows then that students will develop an intrinsic motivation for learning. The external push or motivation from parents won't be as necessary. So it's coming from within. And I think that's going to be fundamental more and more down the track than it ever has been in the past. It's got to come from within rather than from outside. And because each student is also different and developing at different rates and showing interest in planning for the future to differing extents, the so-called right time for when do I actually focus on starting, to look at a career path is going to be different for each student and each family and each community, I guess, group. I suppose that the point is that teachers, and as teachers and parents, we've got to be there for them to provide advice when they're ready for it and when they need it. Yeah. And that's most of the time. I think in addition too, we need to think about a range of pathways that opening our minds beyond, say, medicine or engineering is an absolute essential. Opening our minds up beyond a single career path beyond university is also absolutely essential. And recognising that there are rich and wonderful opportunities available to us all through TAFE. And that can be something that might be an alternative to university. It might be an adjunct to university. I mean, if we take into account famous people like Don Burke, Ken Doan, Dick Smith and Paul Keating, all of them are products of our fantastic TAFE environment here in New South Wales. So, we ought to be looking at alternatives like that as well. If your listeners would like, they could also go to the department's TAIL site. That's a website that offers a whole range of advice and information to parents and community. And you can find links there that will inform you about Board of Studies and about a range of learning opportunities here in New South Wales.
Yeah. Okay. Can I interrupt here? Actually, you said it should come from within.
Yes.
But some of the parents definitely argue on this line because the student is very young and is not matured enough to choose his career path at that stage. So, of course, as you rightly mentioned, we are just advising them in their direction. If they have chosen by mistake with their lack of experience in life, they took a wrong step, what would you think?
Are you talking about the students making the wrong decision?
Yeah, student, right. Because that should come from within, you mentioned earlier.
Yes. Well, it's isn't it hard to know what a wrong step is and how do we make that judgment? Again, is it a question of happiness? Because if it's happiness, and we go back to what Swami was saying about, and your quote earlier, which I certainly couldn't reproduce here on radio or anywhere, but definitely if the product of education is a happy, well-rounded being, then the best person to judge that is the person themselves. And making that decision and contributing to that decision wisely and in an informed way is absolutely essential. And I think outside assistance with that is absolutely normal as well. So it needs to be something that's negotiated.
Yes, exactly. It's a negotiation, making aware of what is going to happen with their rich life experiences, putting forward to the children, and coming to a conclusion.
Precisely. It's having all the information that is currently available and making the best choices with that information. It's doing the best that you can with what you've got.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Ravi Garu, in the same path, what are your thoughts about career? And because you are from e-commerce and business, which is very high demand.
Yes.
So, what do you think about these career paths?
I would like to say that the very definition of career and career path has actually undergone a profound change now. As somebody else mentioned before me, on an average, a person would actually change their career about 5 to 7 times, the research indicates, and that is actually increasing as we grow older for next generation start working. So even if you look at the industry today, the so-called traditional career path where you start at the junior level and then slowly grow in a vertical order is almost vanishing phenomenon now, because there are a significant number of delayering positions in the organization where you don't have too many middle-level positions at all. So therefore, the career path in today's world and the future is mostly going to be the individual growth as a person in terms of their own individual skills and their own individual worth to the organization for which they are working. And then the movement is going to be mostly in a horizontal direction to different other roles and different other positions rather than going vertically up. So therefore, the very concept of career path is significantly changing now. And that's one of the reasons why, if you look at the universities, nowadays the double degrees are very, very popular. Because the assumption is that when you start a university course, you're not really sure what you want to become. And it is true. Most of the students don't know what they are doing, why they are doing. They just do it for whatever reasons. Because they got admission there, they just come there and then study the course. And then as they progress in first, second, third year, they would realize whether what they are good at, what they're not good at, where their passion lies, where their heart lies. And then that's how they actually have built some kind of a flexibility by doing double degree, so that they have that options to go in whichever direction they think ultimately is going to be good for them. And that is the kind of encouragement a lot of universities are also supporting these days. And also, if you look at some of those major professional courses, there is also a shift towards a graduate entry rather than undergraduate entry. The assumption behind that, and the research also indicates that people are in a better position to judge and decide their career path once they finished a basic undergraduate education. So consequently, the entire university education structure is actually revisiting their undergraduate education and shifting from technical skills to the more generic skills, so that they would like to prepare a well-rounded individual with a very basic technical skills but a very strong generic skills, so that he or she could actually use them to move in whichever direction they would like to go.
Generic skills means in particular any...
Communication skills, ability to learn on their own, self-directed
learning or logical development.
Inquiry, logical, analytical ability, these kind of generic skills. So that's why
is there any like a course structure like that? Or?
Every course, every subject that you learn in the university these days, it is mandatory to incorporate some of these generic skills. So whether I teach e-commerce or I teach accounting or legal studies, or you teach biology or botany or zoology, that is an important, essential, inherent component.
Actually, that's a great point, Ravi, because if you look at all of the syllabus requirements in New South Wales, they all incorporate the generic skills across all subject areas. So it's well covered all the way from stage 1 through to stage 6, with different content, of course.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that is a modern world requirement, definitely. Absolutely. Otherwise, there is no survival.
Absolutely. See, whether you are a medical doctor or a legal professional or an accountant or a biologist or a geologist, if you don't have communication skills, you will be nothing. There is no success without communication skills. So that is the kind of an emphasis now university education is putting up.
And we shift our topic to actual working. So some parents encourage when they are doing school certificate or even after that HSC, definitely during university, definitely they have to do some work as a part-time or full-time. So some students may incline to do the jobs from school certificate. What is your advice and thoughts about this, doing part-time job or full-time job? Do you think that they are deviating from the main objectives of their goals and ambitions?
Again, that's an interesting question, probably not as vexed as the previous one, but certainly interesting. In my experience, my son actually wanted to work. So it wasn't that I pushed him. He wanted to work and he found work. And that was in the school certificate year, not during the year, but during the holiday. Well, it's certainly during the year, but not during school time. So he did that during holidays. And I know it varies, again, from family to family. And we fully supported that because he seemed to balance it quite well. So he was still able to concentrate on his school studies while doing a little bit of work. And I feel that that was really beneficial for him. I'll come back to that in a moment. In terms of advice, I think we need to also take a reality check here. There are students and families out there where there is an absolute necessity to actually do part-time work because of the financial constraints at home. And if that is the case, then that has to be the case, and that has to be balanced. On the other hand, there are situations, of course, where the financial structure at home means that the students don't need to go out and work, and that's wonderful as well. But in terms of benefits, well, I've seen myself in my son develop these sorts of skills, certainly financial management skills.
Yeah,
He now
that's
knows what it means to have an extra $20 in his pocket, and he can spend that wisely. Whereas before having his own job, he would squander that sort of money and expect it to come off trees, as many of them do. But apart from financial management skills, he also developed team skills.
Exactly.
He learned
yes.
he learned to work with people he didn't know who had different expectations of him. He learned to work in environments where adults had different ways of communicating, and there were people who had different ways of managing, and that not everyone was as friendly as his particular peer group at school. So he had to develop a different interpersonal skill set to be able to manage these people and stay on the so-called good side of them. And certainly he learnt how to be responsible, get to work on time, dress properly, and do the right thing at work.
Time management.
And management, yes, the whole thing. And certainly I think the culmination of this was a greater appreciation for what parents bring home in terms of earnings, if you understand what I'm saying. But, I don't believe that it's a case of, well, the part-time work will necessarily detract from school work. Again, that's a management issue, and it needs to be something that's negotiated and managed by the student, parents, and perhaps even the school, whatever the needs be. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And it's a maturity thing as well. Some students are ready to go out and work and others may not be. I can remember working in a rose garden. I absolutely hated it, but I learnt to survive that. I worked in a hospital as a kitchen aide, and again, that was really tough. But it taught me how to work with people who, didn't value education as much as I value education.
Yeah.
And so that reconfirmed in me the need to go on to university. Whereas before that, I wasn't as convinced, interestingly. And certainly my work as a manager in a restaurant meant that I could have followed that career, but I didn't. So, again, they were all part-time jobs, but they were managed from age of 15 onwards. So I think, again, your question about does it detract or not detract is an interesting one, and it's one of balance and one of management.
Didn't you think about the goal in which direction you are going while choosing this part-time, like whether it is suitable to your future direction or whatever that comes on the way, or you have chosen that way?
Well, interestingly, my first couple of jobs were only, I took them on in order to earn money, frankly, just to have money. I certainly didn't see a career in rose gardens, and nor did I see a career in working in kitchens in huge hospitals. It didn't interest me whatsoever. Burnt toast and scrambled eggs, no, not my cup of tea. However, it made me think about what I value and what I really want out of life as a kid at that time, 15, 16-year-old. And for me, it actually helped trigger some questions and set some ideas and some thinking straight in my head. So it probably did me more good than harm, although I didn't do terribly long stints there. But I think it's important. I think it's important to get out in the real world. Otherwise, you also end up with a sheltered, one-eyed view that only a curriculum and a teacher gives you.
Thank you very much. That's a very valuable experience, practical life, actually. So now there is an important topic we need to discuss about how we motivate. Actually, this is very, very important for discussion. There is a saying, practice makes perfect. Therefore, every child needs some degree of motivation to achieve the objectives. If we push too much, it may result negatively, and if there is no push, it may also have negative impacts. Some children are very sensitive. The pressure may lead to disaster. In these circumstances, what are your thoughts in motivating the children? Majority of parents in the community are inclined to send their children to the coaching institutions. Maybe because the competition, out of anxiety, psychological push, etc. What level of attention do our children really need this kind of extra coaching, and how we decide whether to send or not? What are the pros and cons and practical outcomes of the results? Ruth, what are your thoughts in motivating the children?
Thank you, Raghu. While we all agree that it's important for students to be motivated, the form of motivation can vary greatly. From my experience as a teacher and parent, some students are well motivated and really only need encouragement, while others need a great deal more to achieve their goals. This, of course, assumes that students have goals in the first place. If these are self-imposed goals, motivation seems to come easily. However, if these goals are imposed by others, problems arise. The question arises, of course, then, when does motivation turn into harassment? If I may take up your point about pushing too much a little further, I think the word push is one we need to be wary of using. From my perspective, what we really want to do is to motivate and encourage students, but at times there can be a very fine line between motivation and pressure. I think when trying to motivate students, we need to consider some of the points that were raised earlier by Susie and Hilary. These included considering the students' natural talents and interests, the fact that students may well change their career path several times during their working career, as Dr. Ravi mentioned too, and also the need to develop transferable skills, which in themselves reflect flexibility and, as Susie mentioned, a commitment to long life learning. Although all of these are all important, I'd like to reiterate the first one in particular, and this actually picks up on a point raised by Dr. Raju and also your quote earlier about education should be aimed at giving happiness. While students and parents may have certain expectations, these may not necessarily be realistic. If the students are pushed, that word again, beyond their capabilities, this can definitely lead to the disaster that you mentioned in your introduction. Of course, while students need to be encouraged and motivated to achieve their best, we have to recognise that their best may not be viewed that way by others. Their best may be, in fact, in areas not considered by their parents, for example, a creative field rather than a technical field. And this, of course, again picks up on Dr. Ravi's point about the number of students who've come in and they're terribly unhappy because they're there not because they want to be, but because their parents have pushed them. So that's come up several times during the conversation, I think. There are a few strategies that parents can use to try and take the pressure off the students. For example, encouraging your son and daughter to build good relations with their teachers and the school counsellors to get all the available information and advice that they can on the interests that the students might have. Taking account of the maturity level of each child. Some students, as you mentioned before, are certainly too young to try and decide on a career path when they're in their junior school. So they need to have the advice and help from others, and that idea of where they will go with their career path may well come with maturity and a lot more experience. And they are all the students that I've seen, and I think I can speak for all of us here. They're all very different and respond very differently to extreme pressure. Some can handle it, some cannot. And another thing that parents can do is to talk and negotiate expectations. And this goes back to the point that I was mentioning before about those expectations being realistic. There's no point in pushing a student who really doesn't have the ability to do what perhaps the parent would like them to do. The student might have the most wonderful skills in another area entirely. And a few of those have been mentioned by the other guests this morning. Also, I'd like to take up again the point that we need to remember about changing the careers. So again, they can't lock themselves into one career path, to use that quote, because it's going to change through the course of their lifetime. And I think I'd like to wind up the motivation comment just by saying, again, education is aimed at bringing happiness. And while we're all there as parents and teachers to help students, ultimately, I think we should remember what is going to make that student happy. Are they going to be happy pursuing the medical career that perhaps mum and dad would like them to do, or would they be happier being the geologist or the ICT architect or the musician? And happiness, I think, is very, very important. Yes.
Yeah. As you rightly mentioned, there is a fine line, actually. Every parent thinks their children are super genius. That is a general thing. Yeah, it's a very hard bit to decide whether to push or just stop.
Yes.
That is of course,
I think we have to actually take one step back and try and put ourselves into the students' shoes and think about, are they really going to enjoy this? Are they going to want to do this? I think we've moved into careers that we have wanted to do. Susie has gone through a whole range of pre-education careers, as has Hilary, as have I, but we've settled on the career that we like to do. We enjoy it. And I think that's something that's really important for parents to consider, is the happiness of the children in all this. As to your question about the coaching institutions, I'm afraid I can't comment on that.
Yeah, of course, that is another thing to address. But yeah, it's all, again, depending on the individuals. They may think their children need extra coaching to achieve their objectives. But yeah, it's again a very sensitive issue. We can't deny that one, or we can't say that is wrong or right. Dr. Ravi Garu, just any comments on this one?
See, about pushing people into a particular career, there are different reasons. And also, when you ask whether you're supporting the kid or forcing them, it's a very difficult and delicate balance parents has to do. Because if you notice, as parents, we're also learning. We don't have hundreds of children. We'll have one or two. So we start with the first one and then try a few things. And then if it doesn't work out, then we go to the second one and try something else. So therefore, we don't know where to actually draw the line from the encouragement and support to force and pressure. So it's a very difficult balance that we need to maintain as we grow older. That's one. Second point I would like to make is, by pushing children to achieve excellence in our area of interest, the one I would like them to pursue and then achieve excellence, is not going to be helpful to them in the long run. Because I'm happy to provide as much support as I could as a parent for them to achieve excellence in my area of preference. And if a child doesn't have a passion and interest in what he or she is doing, no matter what support, encouragement, facilities, tuitions you provide, they may get an academic excellence, but they don't really achieve real excellence in terms of full meaning of that particular profession or occupation. So therefore, if you take my own example, నేను మెకానిక్ ఇంజనీరింగ్ చదువుకున్నాను నేను. అప్పుడు అందరం ఇంజనీరింగ్ చదవమన్నారు, చదివాం అంతే. బట్ నాకు అసలు నట్టుకి బోల్ట్కి తేడా తెలియదు, కానీ మార్కులు తెచ్చుకున్నాం మనం. So what happens is, as you grow older, you move, your career will gravitate and move towards what you are keen, where your passion is. In my case, I like talking. I don't like doing. So I move towards my teaching and consulting and talking profession. Now you are doing things as a mechanical engineer. So same thing happens. If you push your child to a profession where he or she doesn't have real passion, they might finish the degree. But in a matter of 10 years' time, they will definitely move towards their area of interest, whether we like it or not. So if we actually provide them an opportunity right now and then let them explore, the problem is that as a parent, we don't know what they like. It's not an easy task to find out what they like. Even though you are a very good parent, our knowledge is also limited. We don't know hundreds of things. So we think this is a good profession for our child, and we try to tell them, look, this is good for you, go for it. And child also, at that time, they don't know what is good. They also are equally confused. They don't know whether they are good at it or bad at it. So therefore, they will just take it up. So what I think as a parent we should do is, we should try to expose them to different opportunities, different areas. Just like you put him in a soccer lesson, you put him in a piano lesson, you put him in or her in something else and dance. Then as you see that how they are actually developing some interest, you would know that they are good at something, bad at something, and that's how you slowly provide them the support.
Thank you very much, Ravi Garu.
The views from the panel indicate that the present system of education is broadly supporting and trying to achieve the goals that Swami Vivekananda defined. The central idea of education is to expand the intellect, increase the strength of mind, overall generic transferable skills, and become an ideal global citizen. I would like to convey my hearty thanks to Susie Steger Peters, Hilary Hughes, Ruth Mason, and Dr. Ravi Sitamraju for the contribution of their valuable experiences as education experts and parents. Also thanks to Liz Pattison, the senior producer, audio and video at CLI, and assisted by Karthik Venkateswaran, technician in recording this program. Above all, the reason for this successful program is the help from Sri Raju Varanasi Garu, the General Manager for Center for Learning Innovation, Department of Education and Training, New South Wales.